Warning: the following episode contains content that may be distressing or disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Defence Connect's The Progress Report, the show spotlighting the women shaping Australia's defence and national security.
Welcome back to the Progress Report podcast. You've got senior journalist Robert Dougherty, and we've got a special guest here, retired Royal Australian Navy Captain Mona Shindy. And Captain Shindy was the inaugural and only Chief of Navy Strategic Advisor on Islamic Cultural Affairs. Captain Shindy had extensive experience in this Royal Australian Navy, the Australian Defence Force. After migrating from Egypt to Australia, she joined RAN as an undergraduate engineer, becoming one of the first three women to serve on an Australian warship. In 1989, posted to the HMAS Canberra fast frigate, which is now retired, in 1992, saw active service in Iraq in 2003, was a Navy weapons electrical engineer, and also the first Australian Navy captain to wear a hijab. She holds a Masters of Commerce, diploma in export management, and Masters in politics and policy, and has been awarded a Conspicuous Service Cross in 2015 for contributions to cultural and business reform initiatives. She's championed for defence throughout her career, and she was also named the 2015 National Telstra Businesswoman of the Year. Alongside all of the sort of career work, she's also managed to write a biography of her experience in the Royal Australian Navy entitled Shattering Identity Bias. And recently she started a new foundation, Mona Shindy Foundation Incorporated, which is active this year. Welcome to the podcast, Captain Shindy.
Thank you so much, Robert. I'm delighted to be here, and I hope that we have a wonderful chat today.
It's an extensive career, and I think, the guests that we've had on the Progress Report, I can't think of one where, an entire life in the Navy and basically the insights into the Australian Defence Force and its policies and I guess the situation on ground as well for progress across defence. Across your career, you've served at sea, you've worked as an engineer, you've deployed to Iraq. What are some of those favourite memories you have and experiences from your perspective throughout your career?
Well, from an operational perspective, the very best things, the things that I remember with great joy, are the times that I got to deploy to various locations around the world. The times that I got to enjoy other cultures, understand other people, get excited about seeing different topography and the like. So the Navy offered all those opportunities in and amongst doing the job of being in the Navy and being an engineer. So I was absolutely loved that. Experiences that you could never imagine, whether it was getting on a helicopter and going for important work, of course, or being able to jump off the side of the ship in the middle of the ocean with 1,000 metres of water beneath you, and to have those experiences and be amongst the wildlife and just see things that most people in their day-to-day would not get those opportunities to do. They're the best experiences. You mentioned being involved also in conflict. They were not necessarily all fantastic experiences. The Iraq conflict, as you mentioned, was one of those ones that was a very difficult part of my operational experiences. It was it presented a lot of moral challenges for me. There were a lot of innocent people that died in that war, and I guess as we know now, the justifications used to be there and be part of that, of needing to dismantle weapons of mass destruction and the like, were ultimately proven not to be in place. So, all in all, though, there were good and bad memories along the way.
Mm. I know that they often sort of talk about seeing the world in the Navy and things like that. That being sort of a draw card. Was it something that your fondest memories of returning home or being out on operations?
No, absolutely returning home. There's no doubt about that. I think when I first joined the Navy, I went into a recruiting office and I wanted a nice start in life, in a career, great job. I was looking for a sponsorship up front, and Defence offered really lucrative and great opportunities for advancement and development and a good start. I think the thing is, I was also told you can do whatever you want, really. Yes. And so you could go to sea if you wanted to. If you didn't want to, we just need you as an engineer, come and join. So for some time I thought that was all right. I could manage all that. I'd still be able to get married easily, have a family and do that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But those things very quickly changed as soon as I was in, because policies started changing about women now needing to do the same kind of career progression paths as men. Mm-hmm. So although it was exciting to go away and see some of those different cultures, be involved in diplomacy for Australia, have life experiences that you wouldn't get, it still was quite difficult balancing it all with family and other parts of personal life. I used to absolutely get totally seasick as soon as we would sail. It was something that happened to me. And then the most beautiful times were actually coming back through Sydney Heads to come home and to look forward. Oh, not so much about the prettiness, but just the reunions.
Yeah.
That was a real delight, and something that sticks firmly in my mind about that kind of peace that comes after a period of time of adversity and being away, and the isolation and loneliness of it also too. So it's a really interesting career, defence, because there's such wonderful things intermixed with difficult and arduous things, and all of them are things that you need to manage and make work together.
It would have been quite, I imagine, talking about walking into the recruiting centre, that would have been quite a daunting process. And at that time, were you kind of aware that it was potentially going to be a very overwhelmingly male environment that you were going into, and that career was going to sort of, you were going to go into that sort of environment? Were you concerned about that at all?
I didn't think too much about it at that stage. Like at 20 years old, I had already gotten a cadetship with Telecom then, which is now Telstra.
Yeah.
I was keen. My dad passed away when I was a teenager. Mum was left alone looking after 4 children. We were relatively young. There was a real sense of responsibility on my part to feel like I needed to carry my own weight a little bit, take the pressure off Mum a bit. So I was really keen to get a good start into the workforce. The reason I ended up joining the Navy is because my older brother also joined the Navy, and he was sending postcards home about all his little adventures that he was up to while I was sitting in telephone exchanges with the boys connecting up wires on my holidays from uni. And I thought, oh, man, he's made the better deal here, the better decision.
Powerful motivation.
Yeah, so that was the initial start. Did I worry about it being a completely male-dominated environment? Well, I'd studied electrical engineering. I rocked up day one at the University of New South Wales, one of 5 girls sitting in an auditorium of 300 men. So I understood engineering was very male-dominated. So it's not like I was surprised that I would be working with a lot of men. The sheer lack of women was a little bit interesting.
Yeah. Was it a similar experience to engineering in that, you're basically the same sort of, level cohort men to women, ratios?
Yeah, it was similar in numbers, I would say, at that time. Yeah. We're talking about the 80s, studying engineering. More women do study technical fields these days, I think, but it was very obvious, And we clung together and looked after each other like you wouldn't believe because, Yeah,
I imagine there's probably an element of having to do that. That would be a reasonable thing to do as well. One of the things that I've got written here is that when you were one of the first 3 women posted to HMAS Canberra in 1992, they had to convert a locker space into a sleeping quarter. How did that come about? And how was that sort of explained about the preparations that were needed from Defence on that?
Well, I don't think it was explained at all. We were just told that we've been posted, those that were posted, and the locker space was essentially 2 metres by about 1.5 metres. There was a little sink that was put in and 3 racks on top of each other. The assistant logistician, female, was posted in there with me. Yep. I was the assistant weapons engineer, the junior weapons engineer. I was posted in there, and we had the ship's doctor, who was a lieutenant. We were she was a midshipman, the logistician. I was a sub-lieutenant, and the lieutenant doctor, that was us. It wasn't explained. That was what was on offer. That's where you will go. That's your rack. In you go there. We had a chance to have a look at what we could bring on board and how much, not much. It was a situation where the ablution facilities were not really catered for at all. We shared a shower and heads with the executive officer of the ship, and we basically came out of that locker with a towel wrapped around and had to make our way across an internal passageway where people would walk past because they were going on with their business, and get ourselves into that shower space to get ready in the morning. That was the extent of the planning, and throw them in, mix it up, see what happens.
Did it have a special name, like the locker room or anything like that?
I'm not sure now that I remember it. I think it did, but I don't remember what it was called. I do remember, it's just come to mind as you mentioned that at some point I did share a cabin with one other woman of colour at some point in my career. She's now a chaplain, a Buddhist chaplain in the Navy, which is a wonderful achievement and progress. But we tongue-in-cheek, had called that space the chocolate chicks. We'd written on the at the front. So, there were names for everything, believe me, in the Navy.
All the little sort of names, everything, that sort of thing. In terms of at the Navy at that point in time, what are those? I imagine that it was sort of a transition period where they were sort of preparing some of these, some of the new policies for women entering the workforce and things like that. What were some of the big sort of barriers you encountered early that people might not understand today or might not be able to comprehend or know about?
Well, it was everything. The barriers were everywhere, and they were everything: systems, structures, infrastructure, understanding of different requirements and needs. So we've spoken a little bit about the physical makeup of the ships, the structures, just, cobbling together accommodation. Uniforms were other things that were an issue. In terms of, you got into a male uniform. Women are a little bit curvier than men, and so they never fit properly in the beginning. These things have moved on, obviously, since when we first joined. But I think that just the sheer culture of never having worked with women was a big thing for Navy. They never had women on ships. So getting past the wives on the wharf who were absolutely convinced that we as new women would be stealing their husbands away and destroying their families, get on board the ship. There were the other problems about people not being sure about women, your competence, your ability. Are you really up for this? The language was pretty rough.
Is it sailor language?
It was sailor language. There was swear words and posters, sexually explicit movies that were just shown in communal areas of an evening, smoking inside the superstructure of the ships. Lots of things were happening when I first joined that have adjusted in ways over periods of time. But and because our numbers were very small, we attracted a lot of attention. We were the focus of scuttlebutt, jokes. They had stiff books on the ships back then, which they don't have anymore. But
stiff books?
Stiff books, yeah.
I'm not familiar with that word.
Yeah, well, I wasn't either. But I soon became recorded in every single one of those books on board the ship. And they're a culture and a way of acting for people. So when new people came on the ship or somebody who perhaps was not in the in-group, there would be they would be the subject of jokes. So people would play a trick on people.
It's almost like a hazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a hazing. And then document it and say, oh, today I did this to Sub-Lieutenant Shindy, and this was her reaction, and she was embarrassed and humiliated and what have you. And every passage in those books would be finished with the words, stiff. So it was that kind of, got 'em, gotcha, that kind of thing. So, yeah, all those things were there. There was also the worst thing, I think, about the way it was back then. It wasn't the kind of environment that you would walk in and someone would take you under their shoulder and teach you. There was an active process of trying to show someone up, trying to help them fail rather than succeed.
Yeah.
So there were situations where I might be given a brief by one of the sailors in my electrical department that would explain to me how a particular system worked. And I would then be filling it in my journal and writing down and then going to brief the head of the department at the end of the day to say to him, I learnt about the launcher today and this, that and the other thing. And he would just laugh. He'd think it was hilarious. And so it wasn't about people helping you. It was about showing you up and really embarrassing you. And so as a woman, you found that people were working against you, that you had to do a whole lot extra work. There were evenings that I would sit up by myself, isolated, lonely. I couldn't trust what I was being told. And I'd have to read equipment manuals by myself alone to just verify and triple and quadruple check that what I understood about something was in fact reality. So they're very difficult situations when you're already struggling with everything else in terms of being asked to carry, to live in an environment that was never designed for you. But not only was it not designed for you, there's these added obstacles that were put in place specifically for you.
Okay. Was that something that was sort of, I guess, widely done to all new recruits, or is it just sort of, I guess, a focus thing of female recruits that were brought on board? That training sort of, it's not confusion, but it's almost like hazing. Was it sort of universal, or was it just targeted?
I think there was a universal aspect of it, and a lot of it has to do with experience, knowledge, new person, indoctrination, culture of the organisation and what we do around here. And this is how it works. Yeah. So the guys did get a fair bit of that, but I think women got it more because there was more difference. It's almost like an in-group and an out-group.
Yeah.
And so when you've been in long enough and you're pretty much like the majority, you've kind of in the in-group at that point in time, so you don't get that. But that process of getting to the point of being accepted in the in-group, many people were exposed to that kind of behaviour, but more so for women because we were different and all those other issues that happened with something different coming into our space and our areas.
It sounds almost like, there's almost like a guinea pig effect where the structure of the ship wasn't in place, before that. There potentially wasn't policies in place to deal with female recruits coming through, and yourself and other female recruits coming through were a test batch to see, well, will this work, or how can we improve? But it sounded like there wasn't actually much consideration on how you would be trained and the after effects of that. Is that right? Am I on the right track there?
I think so. I think there was there wasn't the preparatory processes done well enough before women were thrown in, mixed up, stirred around, and we'll see what happens. It was a bit of an experiment, certainly from my experience. That's how, when I reflect back on it, that's how it was. They learnt a lot in that process. They learnt because women either complained and we worked out quickly that complaining was dangerous.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So those that did kind of left pretty quickly or were weeded out pretty quickly. Those that kind of swallowed it and kept pushing forward despite certain things were able over time to be the example by which I suppose command was able to look and say, well, that happened to that person. There's no denying that, and we need to fix those things. But yeah, it was very much an experimentation. I mean, even things like the crossing the line ceremony, that's something that they do on ships.
Yes.
It was very different when I first joined, and it's when a person first crosses the equator on a deployment on a ship. If you haven't done it before, you go through this hazing process where, eggs are going everywhere.
There's some aspect of dressing up as well.
Dressing up. Someone dresses up as King Neptune, and everyone has to ask permission. The new people that have never been across the equator have to ask permission. Can I please cross the equator, King Neptune? And it'll be yes. I had a very horrific experience. My first experience was in a very public way on the flight deck of HMAS Canberra, now retired ship, where I was hiding in the ship's helicopter, knowing full well that I had to be hazed. It was part of the process that everyone gets hazed when they cross the line. But eventually my name came up across the loudspeaker, the 1MC, the intercom. And it was, where is she? Where is Sub-Lieutenant Shindy? Get her. She has to go through this process and what have you. And eventually I was found and I was taken out on the flight deck. I had my hands tied behind my back. I had eggs thrown at me, all kinds of things. And then the next thing I know, this is the kind of behaviour that we had where someone grabbed me from behind and essentially was pushing my face into King Neptune's private areas. Now, with that came, a roar of excitement from all the crew that had been on the ship. Now, you've got to keep in mind, I'm one of 3 women from a very conservative background, never been in a position like that or any kind of scenario like that before in my life. And we have a situation where the ship's company is actually enjoying that. And it seemed to go on for forever, and it was a situation where at the time I didn't complain. I didn't know what to do. I mean, the most senior person on the ship, the commanding officer, was on the flight deck with everyone else.
Yeah, assumably they saw no problem.
Well, I don't know whether they saw no problem or not, but it took some time for that to be stopped and for someone to allow me to stand up and then scurry off humiliated and embarrassed. But it was never brought up with me again, and I figured that, maybe just keep moving because what can I do about it? I didn't even know what to do or who to complain to, given that the senior people on the ship that I thought that they were there to help me didn't offer up any support or assistance at that time. So that's the kind of example of things that used to happen. It's tamed down a lot, as I understand now, crossing the line ceremonies from those lessons learned.
Something we do hear about is that there's, as a female sailor or female personnel, military personnel, there's pressure to outperform the other people, sort of in your immediate vicinity, or to become one of the boys, to fit in and be regarded as equal. Did that happen? Do you know if that was sort of your experience as well, or did you see that at all?
Oh, I saw a lot of that. That was the standard thing for many girls that, there were those, as I said, that...
There's a defence mechanism.
There were those that sort of didn't take it and left. There's those that joined in with the swearing, the macho, butchy type behaviour, the alpha type presentation. I can drink harder than you kind of approach, and then being very vulnerable in positions of vulnerability and being preyed on even by people that saw them in those situations. Now, what was really funny about all of that is that for me, personally, I never went down that path. I was always very firm on my values and what I stood for and what I was about. and what I was willing to do. And what I actually found was that in time, that really worked well for me, because people eventually worked out and respected the fact that you were different. You became a bit of a confidant for many people, both other females and males, by the way, because a lot of people actually didn't like these behaviours that we've kind of describing about the heavy drinking or the foul language or the being nasty to others. But the funny thing is with a culture like the defence culture is that because it happened to them, that in time it kind of somehow becomes normalised. So therefore they feel like they should be doing it to others, or that it's okay to do it to others, even though they themselves know that when it happened to them, it was dreadful.
Almost like a generational trauma type thing.
Exactly, and it just goes on and on after the other. So having been someone who didn't get pushed down that path because of my own limits and what I was prepared to tolerate or not accept, like I said, that in time that became a strength for me and for others.
I imagine being sort of a solid rock for people to say, well, you know, she's taking a stand. I can get advice from her, and stand with her. That's a good thing to have on a ship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How much changed? Just in terms of how much changed in terms of the support and I guess treatment of women throughout your entire career, because you were there a number of years, you know, to a senior position. Did you see change throughout, or was it a gradual thing, or did it sort of uptick in the sort of, you know, early 2000s and things like that?
I think it changed. It definitely changed.
Yeah.
Over time, as women that stayed, that they were able to keep for any length of time, were able to inform the process either through observed lived experience and people sort of looking at it and thinking, oh, that's not on, we need to do better, from women progressing to higher levels of influence and rank. They themselves were in positions of being able to advise better and inform changes. As women's numbers increased on ships also, there was more people to rely on. It became more normalised that it's okay to have a female boss or someone in my department that was female. I've done that before.
Yeah.
I know there's no reason to think that that's funny or weird. So in time, I think my observations, by the time I went back to sea as a deputy engineer and then as the head of department of the Weapons Electrical Engineering Department on warships, the culture was more professional. A lot of this vulgarity and leering and jeering and hazing, as you put it, had reduced. It was more civil. It was more respectful. There were different characters and resources to draw upon that made it better for people coming through. That said, I'm not too sure that every part of the training pipeline, from recruitment to getting in and serving and doing your roles, is perfect. I think a lot of, and I don't want to generalise, but there are still elements in those spaces, those training institutions and the like, and through the indoctrination processes of, you know, breaking people down and then building them into the type of officer or sailor that we're looking for, that there's still that thing that I spoke about, well, that happened to me, so therefore it's okay. There's still a bit of that in those earlier years as people come into the outfit. And I think the Defence Force generally can still do a fair bit of work in those spaces to make sure that the right kind of professionalism is projected at those early stages to set those foundations so that as they move through, they don't get tainted by some of that negativity and those difficult and arduous experiences.
But I wonder personally, you know, how did you sort of view that? Because obviously you went through a number of sometimes traumatic experiences. How do you be the leader that says, I'm not going to harden and sort of repeat those mistakes on the next generation coming through? How did you sort of deal with that personally? Your leadership.
I think leadership is one of those things. A lot of how you become a leader is from, firstly, formal training in it and approaches and skills and tools of how do you do it. What do you know about it? And we certainly do a lot of that in the military. We're taught about it. We are given information that helps a person develop. You learn a lot from what you observe. When you see a leader that listens, that includes, that respects, that values contributions from all, then that's a great model to emulate. But you also learn just as much from that leader that you observed that did the opposite of that. And you say to yourself, I can't tell you how many leaders I've seen that says, well, I will never, ever do that, because you felt it so viscerally, either for yourself or for others within the organisation. And I think there's a lot of learning that happens just from being on the job.
There wouldn't have been a leader of, female leader that was of Muslim faith in the Royal Australian Navy at that time, though, right? Because you were the inaugural and only Chief of Navy Strategic Advisor. There probably wasn't someone that you could look to in that regard, right?
No, there was no one during my career that I could find that was like me. There were male Muslims in the Defence Force, but they're not necessarily people that I came across readily in my naval progression. So, as the inaugural Chief of Navy's Strategic Advisor on Islamic Cultural Affairs, that was a position that was established by Admiral Griggs at the time. And he was one of those leaders who was a person who had vision, who could see that, I'm going to have the courage to push something forward that he would have seen the Defence Force could benefit from and needed to learn about. And, I did a lot of that during my career, both in a formal way, like in that role that I was asked to do as a secondary collateral job to my very complex day job running a complex, big sustainment organisation that needed to do its work. And by the way, you can do this on the side too if you wouldn't mind. But a lot of it was done just naturally or because that was the only thing you could do to survive and to keep going. I was very motivated to do well in my career. So I put up with a lot more than most people would put up with or should put up with. And in the process, I always saw the value in, I tolerated that and I'll have the opportunity to influence it such that someone coming from behind me or after would have a better experience. And a lot of the things that I do today have been informed by those lived experiences where I haven't had a mentor, haven't had a proper coach, haven't had someone who understood my challenges or my experiences. So the foundation that you spoke about in the intro that I've set up and has become active this year is all about that. It's all about, okay, how can I get people who don't have the right networks, people who don't have the right connections, people who don't have someone to look up to, how can I give them access to someone that can help them along their journey so that they can find it easier than what I found it as going through my life. And so, it has informed a lot of the work. I would also say that my lived experience, although very challenging for me, also helped others reflect within the Defence Force because they will, although maybe they didn't speak up. In fact, I'm sure they didn't speak up. In fact,
it was a subtle change.
I felt sometimes not very well supported at all, because people get afraid to speak up. They get afraid that, if I speak up for this person that's being hazed or bullied or harassed, then I might be associated with them or suffer something similar. So
you'd be out of the in crowd at that
out
point.
of the in group, yeah. So there's a lot of that. But that said, having just been there for me, I look back and the positive thing is that I was strong enough to hold space for long enough for others to see what happened to me. And I'm a very personable type of person. I mean, if you sit down and have a chat with me, you're going to get it authentically. You're going to get a very personable, honest response. So I think people learnt a lot from me, because I wasn't the kind of person that necessarily didn't confide or didn't express my feelings or didn't communicate. So I always did that. And I think many people have benefited from that along the way too. And that thing I said about learning from what people did and then saying, I would never do that. I think there are a lot of people in the Defence Force, and the Navy in particular, who saw things that happened to me, and they would have internally, although maybe not stood up at the time, would say today that I won't let that happen in my charge, because that's not on.
Yeah. And there's probably a unique situation there in terms of you're getting a lot of pressure from within the Defence Force, but also from the general public as well. Imagine with some of these appointments.
Yeah, well, as the strategic advisor on Islamic cultural affairs, it was a position where, by its nature, its design, its terms of reference, I was thrust into the public domain.
Yeah.
And that brought with it many challenges. There were those internal within Defence that sort of, where are we going with this? We've lost our way. We're now, what are we doing? Islamising the Defence Force. We're focusing on the wrong things. We've got so many issues to do with new capability requirements, with a lack of resources, not enough numbers and the like. And now we're focusing on this kind of thing. There was also the retired community who thought it was a bit strange.
They probably had limited experience.
Never worked with someone like myself, and were quite afraid by it. Then there were even lobby groups who sort of got on the bandwagon. And to be frank, I mean, I do a lot of work in the preventing Islamophobia space these days also, again, because of those lived experiences I've had. But certainly since 9/11, the experience for a Muslim in Australia generally, forget about the Navy or the Defence Force at large, has been a difficult experience. Islamophobia is real, it is nasty, it is hurtful, and it causes a lot of damage. And a lot of the spin and the media coverage and the political opportunism, that is also reflected in how someone like myself was seen in a position like that in the Navy.
I imagine it would have been fairly roughly blank slate at that point to develop, your own policies and advise on policies, new policies coming in. To this day, are there ways that the ADF and Defence can kind of better understand cultural and religious backgrounds as they recruit personnel from the public? Do you find that there's some initiative you'd like to see?
Well, I think there's many things that can be done. One of the basic things is mixing, learning from, including, listening to, respecting alternate and different views and understandings than what you personally are familiar with. And that's for everyone. It's not just someone dealing with minority groups. It's minority groups dealing with everyone also. It's a two-way thing. I think there's a lot to be said with some of the things that Defence has done to try and do things. They've done things over the years like set up that have been championed by particular senior officers, new generation Navy, we've got to get better at this. How can we improve culture and understanding and respect for all? There's been advisors for women, advisors on LGBTQIA issues. There's been committees that have been set up. So there's been efforts that have been pursued with, I suppose, an honest intention to try and improve things. What I think is the resourcing of those issues or those aspects has not been sufficient. And I think there are a lot of competing priorities. When you're a senior person or you've got the challenges of, I don't have enough money to do this for new platforms, or I've got to work out new capabilities that we need to be able to be competitive in the defence arena around the world. Or I've got problems with recruiting, retention and that kind of thing. It tends to become deprioritised. But there are good things that have happened. Like, I've got to be frank about it. And there were some of these champions that pushed for a lot of these things. There have been iterative changes that have happened. For example, when I was appointed to the role that you refer to as the Islamic cultural advisor, it was Defence that was pushing for the hijab, not me. I didn't come up with that. It was already written by logisticians in defence policy that we will allow hijab with uniform. I was the one who personally resisted it for many, many years because I knew what it would bring, because I'd lived the day-to-day experience, the commentary, the vitriol,
another spotlight,
the racism. So I wasn't looking for it, but the thing that changed it for me was the point that there was clear that, I was even asked outright, would you put on the hijab? That kind of thing by a senior officer. And I didn't want to, and I waited a long time until I finally went to the pilgrimage, or the Hajj, the Muslim pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. And that's a really significant milestone.
Mecca there.
Mecca, in Saudi Arabia. Right. It's a really significant milestone for Muslim people. It's like cleaning the slate. You go through a bunch of rituals and whatever. And so I thought, I will come back from that. And that was the time for me to say, well, okay, I'm going to embrace everything that is me, and I'm allowed to. Defence has pushed for it, they want it, and I'm allowed to, and I'm going to do it and give it a go.
Sounds very empowering. It sounds like a very empowering moment.
It was, but it was also a very difficult response that I received. So I was the head of that big support organisation that we talked about before, looking after the maintenance of a fleet of our warships. And I was the boss, looking after, few hundred people through contractors and the like. And my office was at the back of the building. And I remember the first day that I came back to work from the pilgrimage, and I'd made that decision in my mind. I put on the hijab with my uniform and I walked into my office.
I was open mouths.
I was a well-liked, respected officer, someone who people trusted as a leader. And there were literally the faces dropped, inability to make eye contact anymore. People were running past my office in the morning, trying to get a look in, something's... And so it got to the point where I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to... So again, it's that situation where you're it. No one else is there. You're it. You're the one that has to explain everything, explain yourself, justify what's going on. So I found myself calling a clear lower deck where you call everyone into the auditorium. Okay, everyone, here you are. Have a look.
You don't have to run past the office anymore.
You don't have to run past my office. Let me tell you what's happened to me personally. Please ask whatever questions you want to find. So this is the kind of career I had. I wasn't just getting on and doing my job. I was doing all this other stuff too. No one asked me to do it. Well, they did ask me to do it, but they didn't understand that you were actually doing about 10 jobs at once. And a lot of the other stuff that you were doing came with a lot of personal emotion and psychological impact on you that was above and beyond what anyone else was expected to deal with. So that's how that was. That's how it happened. And it got to a point where, being that, as you said in the introduction, that first of many senior engineer, female businesswoman of the year, greatly accomplished in all these things, well qualified, educated, all people could see was the headdress. That's all I was after that point, in many ways, in many people's eyes. Everything else it felt to me, now whether that was right or wrong, but it certainly felt to me, the way I was then treated after that point, as though all that history was somehow erased or didn't exist. You were now this woman with a, I'm not going to say it, but head rag on, and that's all you are, and everything that comes with that. So somehow now in people's eyes, I was now this passive, timid, brainwashed weakling who maybe was controlled by a husband now, or she's lost it or something. There was a lot of that. There were senior female officers, one in particular that comes to mind, who said to me, to my face, that I looked confronting. And although that may have been said by her at that time as, well, she just thought I looked confronting and it was nothing to her, but for me, I felt that deeply.
Yeah. It's a rejection, isn't it?
It's a rejection. Yeah. It's a, you're not one of us anymore. And there was the whole thing about, like, you know, being a senior officer going into briefings or what have you in Canberra, and walking past a corridor and having another very senior admiral walk past and, you know, drop the face, and under his breath you can hear things like, oh, my God. I don't think people really understood what I lived through. And along with that, as we sort of said, the public rejection and the resistance that came with this visible Muslim senior leader was huge. And I don't think people actually understood the personal impact that had on me. It was something that just, I became a problem, you know, I became a risk. I became something that needed to be managed because it was now causing difficulty and friction.
It's a very significant aspect we don't hear about, that sort of internal. It's very potent, to be honest. It's not much I can say about it that I can relate to at all, really.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for many people, and that's why at the time I think I was very hurt. You know, I don't lie about that. I felt betrayed. I felt scapegoated, and a lot of the way people handled that kind of problem that I was being presented as by objectors was to sideline me or to put me off to the side or get her out of public view. And maybe I became too much of a risk. So I had in my brain, and I feel very qualified and capable and of a particular career progression, but that's not what actually happened at that point, because I think it was all too hard. And the reactions, it was one of those experiments again where the way it was dealt with was what was best for the outfit, not necessarily what was best for me.
Yeah, I think on that note, and it's quite poignant, but I think we should maybe have you back on for another podcast, because there's a lot to unpack about this story, and possibly too much for an hour-long podcast. But thank you for your time, Kate. Captain Shindy. It's been great to have you on the Progress Report podcast.
It's my pleasure, Robert. I hope that whatever I offer at any stage, at any time, actually serves to benefit others. So thank you for having me.
And if you'd like to learn more about Captain Shindy, you can visit the Mona Shindy Foundation Incorporated, which has become active this year. Or you can also read her book, Shattering Identity Bias, or read about more information on the Defence Connect website.com.au.